patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Exactly, not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Good morning, I'm Dr. Kerry Gelb, and welcome to Wellness 1280 on Open Your Eyes Radio. Please listen as I discuss the newest information in the world of health, nutrition, and sports every Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Central Time on AM 1280 The Patriot. Also, please share your thoughts by emailing me at drkerrygelb@gmail.com. That's DrKerrygelb@gmail.com, and visit my new website, wellness1280.com, where we have all guest links, Wellness 1280 info, and previous shows. There's no denying that we live in a world surrounded by many sources of toxicity. It is estimated that we are exposed to over 700,000 different toxic chemicals daily. Our bodies are constantly bombarded with toxins from the air we breathe, the food we eat, the skin products we use. Over time, these accumulated toxins can burden our body, leading to fatigue and sluggishness. Environmental toxins have also been linked to cancer, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, kidney disease, and even obesity. The importance of detoxification, the natural process through which our body eliminates harmful substances, is often overlooked as an important health strategy. Today's guest, the founding president of Bastyr University, Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, ND. Dr. Pizzorno is the author or co-author of 6 textbooks for doctors, including the textbook of natural medicine and clinical environmental medicine. He is also co-author or author of 8 consumer books, most recent Healthy Bones, Healthy You, that he co-authored with his wife. Dr. Pizzorno, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for the invitation to join you. I'm excited to be speaking to a new audience here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Dr. Pizzorno, for our audience, what is the difference between a naturopathic physician and a medical doctor?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I want to kind of give you a little broader philosophical perspective on that, because people will simplistically say, well, natural doctors use natural therapies and conventional doctors use drugs and surgery. Okay, fine. That's one way of looking at it differently. But there's a more important way to look at it. And that is, if you look at conventional medicine, it's had a lot of success. And a lot of success by defining what disease is, defining the diagnosis of disease, and defining the treatment of the disease. And that works really well in acute illnesses or infection, like an infection overwhelming a person, or an accident where they've broken a bunch of bones. That kind of approach works great. But there's another way of looking at this, and that is, while it's important to treat these acute things and these injuries, another more and equally important way is to look at promoting people's health. How do you make people healthier? How do you make people stronger? And so rather than looking at what disease they've got, I'm more interested in looking at, well, where are their weaknesses and susceptibilities, and how can we make them stronger? So a person comes in with, for example, diabetes. Conventional medicine, give them metformin. When that fails, then give them insulin. Pretty standard. Natural medicine approach, and we'll talk about this more today, is to say, well, wait, why does a person have diabetes? When I started practice 50 years ago, diabetes was rare, affecting less than 1% of the population. Now it's affecting 13% of the population, and 1 out of 3 people are going to get diabetes. Why? Because of environmental toxins poisoning the body's ability to produce insulin and poisoning insulin receptor sites. So a naturopathic doctor like myself says, sure, when you use drugs to get things under control, well, you have to go after the causes. So what naturopathic doctors do is we believe strongly in the body's ability to heal itself. And our job is to understand what's blocking that body's ability to heal itself. In today's world, environmental toxins are the primary driver of chronic disease.
A number of years ago, when I got involved in finding out about environmental toxins, I was really kind of surprised why conventional medicine doesn't even bring up environmental toxins when it's such a big part of etiology of many diseases. Why do you think that is?
Well, there can be facetious pejorative comment, and that is, in general, drugs don't get rid of toxins. In general, the body considers drugs just another toxin, so it doesn't fit their philosophy. But the other part is conventional medicine that there's not being taught it. I mean, doctors really care about their patients, but they only can practice what they're taught and what is considered the standard of care. So right now, if a medical doctor treated a patient with diabetes with detoxification and got their blood sugar working properly, they'd be subjected to medical disciplinary board harassment because they're not using standard of care. Standard of care is, well, weight control, metformin, and insulin. No, the real problem is the environmental toxins, and they're not trained to recognize them, to diagnose them, or to get them out of the body.
You know, if you look at some of the statistics on environmental toxins, and the Environmental Working Group does a great job with this.
Yes.
There's been over 85,000 industrial chemicals that have been registered in the United States over the last half century or so. And the average female puts about 12 personal care products on their body, which is over 100, close to 170 different chemicals. The average male, puts on maybe 85 chemicals, and the average female is 12 personal care products, but the teenagers are putting 17. So if it's 168 different chemicals, for teenagers, it's got to be close to 200.
Yes.
What could that do to people?
Excellent question. So we now suffer the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever. Okay. Diabetes, as I mentioned before, rare when I started practice half a century ago, now is very common. Why? What happened? So people say, well, it's because people eat too much sugar. Nope. When you look at the sugar consumption has been fairly stable for the last 50 years. I mean, it's too much, but if sugar was the cause, diabetes epidemic would have started way sooner, not sugar. Next one is obesity. And yes, obese people have dramatically more diabetes than non-obese people. However, if you measure an obese person's body load of what we are now calling, researchers are calling diabetogens, obese people in the bottom 20% of body load of diabetogens do not have increased risk for diabetes. Diabetogens. So researchers are saying now starts a strong correlation between metals and chemicals in the environment and diabetes that they call the ones that are increasing diabetes diabetogens. So what are those diabetogens? Well, one of the major ones is phthalates. And where do we get phthalates from? Health and beauty aids. So every time a person puts on a health and beauty aid, they increase their phthalate level. As the phthalate level increases, so does the risk of diabetes. And what starts first is insulin resistance. Everybody knows, first you get insulin resistance, then you get diabetes. What is insulin resistance? It means the cells are not responding to insulin to let sugar in. Well, why might that be happening? Well, first one is, well, maybe the insulin is too low. Okay, that's a possibility. It's not the possibility. Main problem is the cells don't respond to the insulin. Why not? Because phthalates bind to the insulin receptor sites on the cells, so the insulin can't activate them properly. So every time a person puts on those health and beauty aids, unless they're phthalate low, they've increased their risk of diabetes. Diabetes.
It's really amazing, and we're going to get into diabetes pretty in detail. But I just want to ask you, in Europe, about 1,300 chemicals are banned, but in the United States, only about 11 or maybe around 11 are banned. Where's the disconnect there between the United States and Europe?
Well, that's an extremely good question, because it's worse than it looks. So we're talking about these chemicals. I just finished writing an editorial on plastic food containers, trying to determine if they're leaking chemicals into our foods. Okay, and guess what? If properly made, no, they're not leaking. But when researchers go and look then at these food containers, what they found is these food containers contain over 2,000 chemicals. Less than half of them have actually been tested for toxicity, and 200 of them have known levels of toxicity. So when people are eating food from plastic containers, they're putting these chemical toxins into their bodies. There's source after source after source of the chemicals coming into their body.
We were talking about why the United States only has about 11 products, toxins, chemicals that are banned, where Europe has over 1,300.
So first, I'd like to clarify that the US has banned way more than 11 toxins. So I don't know where that information came from, but I would suspect that data source is not reliable. So the good news is that Europe has been much better about being aware of chemical toxins. And so the standards they have established for what's allowable in food and what's allowable to be released into the environment are quite a bit stricter around chemicals. In my opinion, they're not quite as good around toxic metals. And because much of the industrialization of the world started in Europe, and you look at Sweden, for example, Sweden had the first major mining operation for metals, probably in the world, dating back to the 1300s. Okay, so it's been a very, very long period of time, over 1,000 years, where they've been basically leaking metals into the environment. So while the European Union is better than we are, both governments are allowing way too much toxins into the environment.
And can you finish your thoughts on the plastic containers, putting them in the microwaves?
Yeah, so as I was looking at all this research showing direct correlation between a wide range of chemicals in the body and various diseases, I started wondering, well, so where are all these chemicals coming from? So I'm kind of systematically working my way through the sources. And it turns out a major source of these is food packaging. Now, so that when you look at the food packaging, you can determine the kind of plastic in the food packaging by looking at the recycle code. So on the bottom of the container, it's a little triangle thing with a little number in it that tells you the chemical used to create the plastic for the container. Now, if you look at the chemicals used to create the plastic containers, by themselves, they're not very toxic if manufactured properly. But what's happened is many of these are not being manufactured properly. So rather than having all these plastic materials bind together, what are called polymers, that's plastic are basically polymers, they have what are called monomers. So the pieces that bind together are called monomers, you bind together, you get polymers. Well, when they don't do the binding properly, you have all these monomers. Now, those monomers, when they leak into the food, are problematic. But as I mentioned before, they don't just have the pure chemical for the plastic. Many of these plastics have intentional additives, like plastics are clear. Well, when a plastic's brown or red or any of the other colors, well, they're adding something to it. If they're concerned about the plastic having to be more resistant to the oils in the food that's being put in them, well, now they have to add things to the plastics to make them more resistant to the oils. And then there's accidental contamination, where there's things in the plastic containers that should not be there, and they're found in the foods that are stored in the plastic containers. So in the ideal world, plastic containers should be fine. In the real world, they're not. And one of the worst things are plastic wraps. So you go to the store, buy some cheese, it's wrapped in plastic. That plastic is leaking chemicals into that cheese. And it's time and temperature dependent. So you might say, well, it's already in plastic, don't worry about it. No. When you get it home, take it out of the plastic, put it in a glass container. Do not heat any food in plastic, particularly microwaves. The rate of the chemical leaching into the food is directly dependent upon the temperature of the food. And if you have any doubts about that whatsoever, get a styrofoam cup, pour some hot coffee in it, and let it sit for a few minutes, and then taste it. You taste it, it's full of chemicals.
Now, if you look at the main components to health, there's genetics, nutrition, environmental toxins. How much of our health is related to genetics, nutrition, environmental toxins? In your opinion, what would you say?
Yeah, another great question. So there's quite a bit of research on this, and I think it's pretty safe to say now that only 10 to 15% of chronic disease is due to genetics. Okay. Now it's going to vary according to what disease you're looking at, what population you're looking at, but it's only about 10 to 15%. Then you got another 10 to 15% due to nutritional deficiencies. And the rest, around 60%, as near as I can tell, maybe 70%, is due to environmental toxins. You look at the diabetes epidemic, okay? I can make the case that 90% of the diabetes epidemic is directly related to increasing body load of chemical and metal toxins.
And our body has a natural way of detoxifying.
Yes.
Now, some people can detoxify better than others.
Yes.
Why is that?
Yeah, great. Another good question. So there's huge variation. So as you know, we basically detoxify. There's two main methods. There's a lot of secondary ones. Main one's the liver, and the secondary one is the kidneys. So we have great ability to detoxify, but we also have substantial genetic variations in how well we make our detoxification enzymes. And those enzymes are highly dependent upon nutrients. You go through and look at the, there's probably about 60 enzymes in the liver that do most of the detoxification. You look at what nutrients each of those enzymes need, you have them all up together, all required nutrients are required for those liver enzymes to work properly. And there's one example, it's going to affect a lot of your population here, but listening to this is women. Women who are anemic, typically due to either excessive menstruation or inadequate iron intake, cannot produce the enzymes in the liver as effectively that are so critical for detoxification. So there, and another area is nutrition. As I said, these things are very dependent upon nutrients. If you look at the standard nutrient tables, 70% of Americans are deficient in at least one nutrient. 50% are deficient in multiple nutrients. So not only genetic susceptibility, it's also deficiency of nutrients. And the third area that's a huge issue, and that is overload. So our detox systems have limited ability. And so while I may be able to get rid of this one particular toxin very effectively, but they're not being exposed to just one toxin, they're being exposed to many toxins. If all those and many of those toxins try and go through the same pathway gets overloaded, so can't get rid of those toxins.
Now, how about certain people that take certain medications all the time, like people that are on acetaminophen all the time, or they're on NSAIDs, like ibuprofen all the time? How does that affect the liver and the kidney from detoxifying?
Hugely. So let's look at acetaminophen. One of the big problems with acetaminophen is that it depletes a critical molecule in the body called glutathione. So glutathione plays a major role in a lot of detoxification. Glutathione is also necessary to maintain mitochondrial health, and there's an inverse correlation between direct correlation between a person's glutathione levels and their longevity. Older people have higher glutathione levels. The more chronic disease a person has, the lower their glutathione levels. So glutathione is incredibly important. So what happens when a person is exposed to a lot of toxins? They deplete their glutathione. So acetaminophen depletes glutathione. So that's why it's a problem, because it now makes us more susceptible to the damage from other environmental toxins, because now we deplete our glutathione. Now we look at the NSAIDs. So glutathione is not, acetaminophen is not strictly speaking of NSAID. You look at the other NSAIDs, they cause kidney damage. And I give this example for my students, which shows how effective the body is at healing itself. Because when a person has been taking a lot of NSAIDs, the filtration rate of the kidney goes down. Something called EGFR. The EGFR is a glomerular filtration rate.
Now, would that include just ibuprofen, like the Advils of the world, or is that also?
Yeah, ibuprofen, aspirin.
Aspirin. So for people that take an aspirin every day to thin their blood, it does affect their detoxification, even in 81.
It damages the kidneys.
It does.
The kidneys will become less functional. And as the kidneys become less functional, they're less able to get the toxins out of the body. But here's a really exciting piece of research. Study was done on people with stage 5 kidney failure. So, those people, they have EGFR less than 15, and they have to either have kidney replacement or be on dialysis. Okay, so they're basically at the end of the stage of kidneys. So one study, all they did was have that people with stage 5 kidney failure stopped taking all non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, as well as acetaminophen. And then they measured the eGFR 6 months later, it had over doubled to over 25. So the average was a little bit over 12. And after getting rid of the NSAIDs, it over doubled to over about 25. So by its tremendous ability to heal, we stopped damaging it. And that's what we've done with these metals and chemicals. We damage the body so hard, so much, it can't heal itself properly.
And you mentioned before about 70% of us are deficient in at least one nutrient. Do you recommend a multivitamin? What's our best way not to be deficient in a nutrient?
Yes. So number one is eat real food. Eat real food that's organically grown, stored properly, and prepared properly. So that's where your best nutrition comes from. Because we talk about vitamins and minerals, and the problem with the vitamins and minerals is that we're only supplying the things that we know are important and have been defined as important. So you add up all the vitamins and the minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, things like that, it adds up to about 43 different molecules. If you look at actual food, plants, there are almost 50,000 different molecules in food. So we all decided that 0.1% were important and everything else was not important. When we started looking at the research around flavonoids and carotenoids and things of this nature, they're hugely impactful on health. So when I said that 70%, that was just the vitamins and minerals. You start looking at these other factors, and I would assert that virtually the whole population is deficient in one or more of these molecules that are supposed to be in food that are critical for health.
Now, I am concerned about the way food is made today, grown today, than it was 50 years ago, because there's not as much nutrients in food today as
Yes.
50 years ago.
Yes.
Does that mean we should take supplements?
Yes. So I think it's absolutely critical to take dietary supplements. Now, I don't recommend high dose dietary supplements, but I recommend really broad spectrum dietary supplements. So I don't know if it's appropriate to mention, but I designed one called BioFoundation G.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, good.
And how do we get it? Tell us all about it.
Okay, well, there's a company called Natural Factors, the largest supplement company in Canada. They have a professional brand called BioClinic Naturals, and they asked me to design their multivitamin. So I designed the multivitamin, which if you look at it, you might say, well, it's not real high in this nutrient, not real high in that nutrient. That's true. But it has many things that I can put into it that are important for health.
Hold that thought. I'm with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, founding president of Bastyr University. He's educating us today on environmental toxins, and we're going to learn how to get those toxins out of our body. We're talking right now about multivitamins. We'll be right back.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
This is Dr. Kerry Gelb for Open Your Eyes Radio. We're back with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno. Dr. Joseph Pizzorno has written many, many books. You can get them on Amazon. His newest book, Healthy Bones, Healthy You, that he wrote with his wife. I can't wait to read that book. He's such a wealth of information. But before the break, he was telling about a multivitamin that he developed. How can we get it? And why is this multivitamin so good?
Yeah, I keep saying you great questions because you keep asking good questions. So I did a corporate wellness program in Canada that was funded by one of the wealthiest men in Canada. He sent his personal Learjet down to Seattle to pick me up to fly up to Calgary, Canada, to help improve the health of his oil field workers. And so it's 4,500 oil field workers. And they've been doing kind of conventional wellness programs for them, but he wasn't getting very good results. So he asked me to do it. And I said, well, I'm a true believer in natural medicine and nutrition and such, but I'm also very objective. So I want to run lab tests on all your employees to see what are they deficient in, what are their toxicities, what's their metabolic status, how much can I spend? He said, blank check. I said, really? He said, yes. If you can convince me the lab test is going to help my employees, I will pay for it. So I ran the equivalent at that time, this was 10 years ago, of it'd be about $3,000 worth of lab tests on each one of 4,500 people. So I was able to actually, in a large population, to actually test what's the nutritional status, what's their toxic status, how well is your body working metabolically. I learned a lot. So I'll tell you right now, out of the 4,500 people I tested for nutritional deficiencies, only one person did not have at least one nutritional deficiency. I mean, So this is objective data. Everybody had nutritional deficiencies. So so as I looked at what the deficiencies were, I said, well, if we're gonna make a multivitamin, actually I made the multivitamin for that project. So, and these, you might say oil field workers, you might think about, oil refineries, things like that. No, these are typically guys who get up in the pickup trucks in the morning, drive out to the prairie and check to make sure the oil pump is working properly. So not having a bunch of other exposure. They're not weird groups of people. They're just kind of the average people living in Canada. And it turns out their numbers are the same as the US. So I then looked at, well, okay, now we know what nutrients they need. Then I started looking at how about the environmental toxic load? I was so surprised by what I found. I found so much toxicity. So I said, okay, well, now we got to put some things in the multivitamin to help me get rid of the toxins more effectively. And then I looked at the metabolic activity, like how high were their insulin levels? How was the blood sugar level, resting blood sugar level, things like this. And I realized, whoa, now we got to do things to help improve blood sugar control as well. So that's how we came up with that vitamin. And it's the first supplement I've ever had people come back to tell me that when they started taking it, within a few days, they noticed they felt better. So
And how can someone get it?
Oh, so it may be on. I know it's on Amazon, but the problem with Amazon, you never know whether it's a proper product or not. They can get from any healthcare professional because it's a professional brand. I don't know if there's a direct-to-consumer way of getting it that's trustworthy.
Well, what's the name of it again? I'm sorry.
Okay, it's called Bio Foundation -G.
Thank you.
So then the -G was note that it emphasized the production of glutathione, which is so critical for getting rid of environmental toxins.
And we're going to talk a lot about glutathione, but I want to ask you about cancer and toxins. About 1 in 4 of us are going to get cancer, God forbid, in their lifetime. And in 1977, there were studies done, and they said that about 80% of cancers were caused from environmental factors. But then in 2010, there was another study by Soto, I think Soto, and he said up to 93% of cancers is from poor food and environmental toxins. Can you talk a little bit about how toxins cause cancer?
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at arsenic. I'm bringing arsenic up for a good reason. Number one, it's the worst toxin in the world, including North America. Number two, about 1/3 of the population has high enough arsenic levels in their body to increase the risk of known disease. And number three, what are those diseases that are caused by arsenic? Diabetes, cancer, and gout. So diabetes, cancer, and gout are 3 of the major diseases caused by arsenic. So 1/3 of the population has arsenic levels, enough to cause those diseases or dramatically increase risk for those diseases. So how do these toxins cause disease? Often, and we'll look at arsenic as an example, what they do is they damage the DNA. And when you damage the DNA, it doesn't reproduce properly, and it can get to a situation where it's reproducing into a cell that now has lost its growth control and now starts to grow and metastasize, and we call it cancer.
Before we talked about diabetes and toxins, and there were 2 broad categories that in your paper about how toxins can cause increased insulin resistance. If you could go over that, blocking impaired insulin sensitivity and affecting the beta cells.
Right. So we're looking at loss of blood sugar control. There's 3 areas we have to look at. One is sensitivity of the cells to insulin. Second is the messaging within the cells about what to do with that sugar. And then the third part is the production of insulin by the beta cells of the pancreas. So let's look at something like arsenic. The main reason why arsenic has a strong correlation with diabetes, I think about 15% of diabetes is due to arsenic, is because arsenic directly poisons the pancreas and directly poisons the beta cells, so they can't produce as much insulin. Just pure and simple, can't produce as much insulin. But arsenic has a double whammy, and that is that also when it is high enough levels, it makes the cells less responsive to insulin. So you get insulin insensitivity as well as decrease in insulin production.
And how about BPA when it comes to diabetes?
Yeah, bisphenol A is very interesting. So number one is the good news is that bisphenol A levels have gone down as the public's become aware of it as a problem. The bad news is that the manufacturers, most of them have simply replaced bisphenol A with other bisphenols like bisphenol S, bisphenol F, bisphenol AF, and bisphenol Z. Now, the reason I bring those up is bisphenol S is hugely damaging to human fertility, and in particular in men. As bisphenol S levels go up in men, the ability to produce sperm goes down to eventually the point where they either are not producing any sperm at all, or it's so damaged, the DNA in it is so damaged, it doesn't reproduce, can't be used for reproduction.
And how about when you get a receipt? Is that, what
Yep.
is that?
Good way to get bisphenols into your body. Every time, so these heat sensitive receipts, every time you touch them, you get bisphenols into your body.
And when going back to arsenic, they put arsenic, the arsenic's in the water, and there's a lot of water supplies that aren't tested to see if they have arsenic, and they put it in a chicken feed to make the chickens plumper and to turn the chickens a little pinkish color, so people would be more likely to buy it.
Yes. So up until the past few years, arsenic compounds were the part of the standard of care for chickens. So a substantial amount of the arsenic people were getting was from eating chicken. Now, the good news is that they've decreased the official amounts of arsenic that are supposed to be used. So chicken is not as bad as it used to be, but still highly variable. I had an interesting example of that. I was given a lecture on environmental medicine in Australia. And the guy who was leading it at the end of the conference gave us all a test patient. They brought this patient with all these diseases and all these problems. And this cardiologist had done all these sophisticated tests, could not figure it out, and finally figured it out. So as soon as he told me what happened, the guy was trying to lose weight, started eating a lot of chicken and rice to lose weight, poisoned himself with arsenic. So even though it wasn't supposed to be arsenic, when they went back to the chicken farmer to get the chickens from, they're using a lot of arsenic compounds. So some farmers are still using it, even though they're not supposed to.
And is there something you could do to the rice to get the arsenic
Yes.
out?
So if you cook the rice for like 1 minute or 1 to 5 minutes, depending on it, throw the water out and then cook it again, you'll dramatically decrease the amount of arsenic in it. But you also will decrease the amount of trace minerals as well.
And how about chicken? How do we know we're buying chicken without arsenic in it?
I do not know. And that's a great frustration for me.
And about, I've read that about a third of the population have arsenic levels above a level which could cause disease. And even gout patients, which you mentioned before, about 50% of gout is due to
That's what the
arsenic.
research says. About 50% of gout is due to arsenic.
And so if someone has gout, obviously detoxification, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, is a good strategy to. And have you seen that help reverse gout by doing detoxification?
And that particular condition, no, I've not seen that.
And
all I can say is looking at the research.
And how about water filters? What water filters do you think are best to get rid of arsenic?
So pretty much the only water filter that you can depend upon for getting rid of arsenic is reverse osmosis. Like you do distillation as well, but that's not as practical for a house. So reverse osmosis will do it.
And what are the good and the bad about reverse osmosis? Is there a downside to
So
it?
same thing with reverse osmosis. It's blocking pretty much everything except the water. So you won't have as many minerals in the food after doing reverse osmosis, in the water after doing reverse osmosis.
So if you do reverse osmosis, would you recommend putting pink salt to get the minerals back in the water?
If somebody will show me an actual analysis of pink salt and tell me what's in it, then I would say yes. But the pink salt, I do not see what's in it. And a lot of these salts, folks, fair warning, many salts are contaminated with metals. It just depends on where they come from.
So we were talking about BPA, and quite frankly, I'm concerned about BPA because it causes IQ points. It could cause problems with childhood behavior, and it has estrogen like effects. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Sure. We're looking at ADHD in children. We've looked at many factors, and bisphenol A was one of them. However, organophosphate pesticides were by far a bigger issue. Now, going back to the bisphenols, though, I cannot overstate their problem. So when you look at when bisphenols were discovered, they were discovered way back in the 1960s. Oh, actually, more like the 1930s, but then in the 1960s, they were looked at as a substitute for estrogen. So looking at synthetic estrogens, and they're looking at DES, diethylstilbestrol, and BPA to determine which synthetic estrogen to use. And it turns out that diethylstilbestrol turned out to be more effective than synthetic estrogen, so it was used as a synthetic estrogen. And BPA was put on the shelf until many decades later it was recognized that it was useful as a plasticizer. I want to go back to that DES. So the DES, as you may know, after a few years was pulled from the market because it was causing cancer in the children of the women who were taking it, particularly urogenital cancers. I have a personal experience with that. My college sweetheart's mother took a DES for her sister, and for her brother, because she was having trouble getting pregnant due to nausea pregnancy, or having trouble keeping her pregnancy due to nausea pregnancy. So she took the drug, able to have successful pregnancies. Her daughter, my girlfriend, college girlfriend, died in her late 30s from breast cancer. Her younger sister died in her early 30s from urine cancer, and her brother died from prostate cancer in his early 40s. So the whole family died from DES. DES, and remember, and bisphenol A was considered as the alternative to DES. Now, I'm not going to assert that bisphenol A has caused all the same problems as DES, but you got to look at it. They're endocrine disruptors, and they're basically causing estrogen-like activity in the body independent of any control mechanisms. So I say, well, causing estrogen, well, estrogen is a normal product, shouldn't be okay. Well, remember, if you look at the estrogen levels in a woman, they go up and down all the time according to the cycle. The body controls how much estrogen is there. When you give people synthetic estrogens, you're constantly bombarding the body with estrogens without any control. So it causes unexpected results.
And is this in the water bottles?
So it was in the baby's water bottles. And when I think Consumer Reports was one of the organizations that brought that up, there was a huge public outcry. So now those polycarbonate baby bottles don't have bisphenol A in them anymore.
How about regular water bottles that people buy all the time? That it's,
Yep.
especially if you live in a place that's very hot and that water is sitting on trucks that are very hot, then it goes into the store. What's happening there? How much BP stuff?
So when I was doing the research on plastic food containers, almost all of them check it for water, and of course they check food. But just plain old water in some of these plastic food containers would absorb these chemicals into them, and the more they heat it up, the more chemicals go in. If you look at my book, The Toxin Solution, here's my book, The Toxin Solution, look at what's on front of it. You know, water bottle, source of chemicals.
So if we want to avoid this, we got to stick with glass.
Glass.
What do you think is stainless? Because sometimes I drink out of stainless, I feel I'm tasting the metal.
Yeah. So another example, if properly made, stainless steel is very inert. But the question is if properly made. So we help people determine if the water is clean or not by using something called a zero water. So it's a little pitcher, you pour water in and you pour it out and it's clean water. But then what's really cool is they got this little measuring device. You put it in the water and determines if it's clean or not. So, and they rate it from like 0 to hundreds. So if you, and I'm doing a project in Flint right now, helping people with diabetes detoxify. So we measured the water just coming out of the tap. It's like 100, really bad. Run through the zero water, 0. So then we said, well, how about these containers with these people with really expensive stainless steel containers and glass containers? Put the clean water in the glass container, no problem whatsoever. Put it into stainless steel container, it came back 70. So the stainless steel was not made properly and was leaking metals into the container.
That's what I'm always concerned about with.
Yes, if you can, so our taste mechanisms are really good, really sensitive. If you can taste something in the water, that water is contaminated.
Interesting. Now, going back to arsenic really quick for a second, how do people know if they have arsenic in their water? Should they call their water company or they should just always filter their water?
So, in the ideal world, everybody would filter all their water. So here in our own home here, we have a whole house carbon block filter and metal precipitator. So all water coming to our house is cleaned up. Now, It's not going to get much arsenic, but the good news is we don't have much arsenic here. It's going to get rid of most of the other stuff. So the best way to do it is first test your water. The water's clean, don't worry about it. But you're probably not going to be totally clean. The simple solution is a whole house carbon block filter. If there's a lot of arsenic, you've got to do reverse osmosis. And how do you know if you got it or not? Only way to do it is by measuring. Because the problem with a lot of these toxins, at relatively low levels, you usually are not going to taste the toxin, okay? But it just accumulates over time and causes damage. So you got to measure.
How about microplastics? We hear a lot about microplastics in water. They can get into, if they get really small, like a micron, they can get into our cells and into the human blood, the lungs, and there could be like 240,000 little tiny pieces in plastic, fragments of water that we're drinking. Tell me about microplastics and what do we have to worry about with that and how can we clean it up?
Yeah, so yes, we have to worry about them. A study just came out, I think it was New England Journal of Medicine, where they had people getting operations for atheromas. So they have these big kind of growths in their blood vessels. Sometimes got blood clots, things of this nature. And they decided to measure the amount of microplastics in these atheromas in their arteries. And they found a direct correlation. The higher the level of the microplastics, the bigger the tumor that the person had. So clearly the microplastics are stimulating these atheromas in the blood vessels. I mean, huge issue. Kills people.
Something like a Brita hub could get rid of microplastics. I don't know if you agree with that.
I don't know. There's a study, the reason I mentioned Zero Water is there was a study done where they looked at 10 of the leading brands for desktop brands for getting toxins out of water. They tested all of them for arsenic, and the Zero Water was the only one that got rid of arsenic. All the other ones had almost no effect on arsenic whatsoever. And the reason that it works is because they are using reverse osmosis in the Zero Water. They use both a carbon block filter and reverse osmosis to clean up a lot. And by the way, I have no commercial relationship with them. I just want to know what to recommend to people.
I saw something that boiling water could get rid of up to 80% of the microplastics. But to me, that doesn't make sense because you would think that the microplastics would melt in the water and you're still drinking it. But how do you feel about that?
I'd have to see a study, but I would assume that evaporation would leave the microplastics behind in the water. And evaporated water would be clean.
It would be clean. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are different ways that we could detoxify plastic from our bodies?
I can tell you how to get rid of the plastic compounds. I can't tell you how to get rid of the microplastics at this point.
How about plastic compounds in general, real quick, as we come up to the end?
Number one is avoidance. Number two is promote glutathione.
So as we're coming up to the end of today's show, Dr. Pizzorno has been very kind, and he's going to stay and do part 2 for next week. And we're going to get very much into the different types of ways to detoxify. We're going to finish up on some of the chemicals and some of the different types of medical conditions caused by toxins. Dr. Pizzorno, people want to find out more about you. How can they do that?
Well, I have a website, drpizzorno.com, but I rather recommend just go to Amazon and buy my books, The Toxin Solution. I tell people, buy my books, Toxin Solution, read it, and then do it. Yeah. Too many people read my books and then, well, you make me work kind of hard. Yeah, you want to be healthy, you got to work at it.
It really is something when it comes to environmental toxins, how it really could cause havoc on our body, and how in conventional medicine, we really don't think enough about it. And bringing this word out to the public is really something great. So, Dr. Pizzorno, I want to thank you for joining me this week, and we're going to bring you back next week, and we're going to do part 2. Thank you so much.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.
OIE Broadcasting is the emerging leader in social media. We use scientific entertainment to drive more patients into your office. Visit oiebroadcasting.com and sign up today.